contribution to reforestation and beautification in Dominica?
We are going to make our village the most beautiful one
by planting flowers along the roadside.
I'm planting trees at my school so we can have fruits for snack. Yeah!
At the Forestry Division, we are striving to mitigate against coastal degradation. Trees contribute to soil stability, clean air, and pure water.
Building a climate-resilient country requires the contribution of every Dominican. Give back to nature. Plant a tree for your future.
That will be $78.50.
What? All that money for two little things?
And an additional 50 cents if you want a plastic bag.
All you get enough of my money already. I worked with my reusable bag. It's stronger and all I need is one. Or you shouldn't even be giving plastic bags. Or you not hearing all the announcements from Ministry of Environment then. For the little bit of time we use a plastic bag, it takes thousands of years to decompose. That's not good for the environment. And another thing...
Wait, Papa. Next, please.
My lady, she writing, plastic clogs drains and cause flooding. Animals on land and water can also be killed by plastic pollution.
Opt out of using plastic bags when possible or use reusable shopping bags for carrying groceries and other items. Remember, our environment, our responsibility.
Plastics must go. Let's spend them all. Join me and shout.
Dominic c'est un pays qui belle, qui naturel. Dominic c'est pays nous. Mais qui ça ou ka fait pour aider Dominic? Nous ne pour protéger forêt nous, l'eau nous, environnement nous et même santé nous. Quand ça change, là où aller faire commission, mener un sac, empêcher pollution plastique. Plus plastique, ça fait environnement nous l'aide, boucher dalle nous, et ça tue bête nous et poisson qui englobe nous. Changer aussi, qui nous n'est pour chaîne là tout nous net. Pas ni jeter zodis n'importe côté, pas garder pour excuse, pas faire compte doum, servi en boîte zodis. Écoutez bien, ou ça même en des beltes Dominique, ou ça planter fleurs pour chimère en communauté, planter pe bois qui ça en des mène forêt à vivre, et pour protéger nous, et puis fruits pour manger.
Good morning to listeners of DBS Radio, and it's another episode of the Ministry of Environment, Rural Modernization, Kalinago Upliftment and Constituency Empowerment weekly radio program, Talking Environment or Responsibility. Like to use the opportunity to say good morning to the Honorable Minister, Honorable Kozia Frederick, the Parliamentary Secretary, Honorable Darren Lloyd, the Permanent Secretary, Miss Lisa Valmore, to all heads of the department, members of staff, by extension in the government service, and everybody listening to the program. Also special mention or special good morning to the Government Information Service boss, Mr. Chad George. Just want to use the opportunity to send condolences to a member of staff who lost a loved one yesterday. Shana, condolences to you on behalf of myself and my extension in the ministry. This morning we have with us two gentlemen from the Forestry Department. We will be speaking on World Wildlife Day, which will be celebrated next week on Tuesday. So we have two folks from the Forestry Division this morning. Anybody wishing to join into the program can do so on 1-800-327-448-3284 or on the overseas line 305-432-9744. These numbers again, 1-800-327-448-3284, 305-432-9744 on the overseas line. So before I get into the introduction of my guests, I am the host of the program. My title is the project officer in the ministry. My name is Liam Sebastian. So I'd just like to use the opportunity to say good morning and welcome to the two guests to the program this morning.
Good morning. Josh Barron, Assistant Forest Officer. I the head of the education unit in forestry and also the research and monitoring.
Good morning. My name is Kelvin Felix. I'm the Assistant Forest Officer, Protection Unit. At the Protection Unit, our job is to preserve, protect, and conserve the environment.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me on the program this morning. As we said, we'll be discussing World Wildlife Day, which will be celebrated next week. So the first question I will ask, in terms of the theme for this year's celebration. What is the theme for this year's celebration, and what does that theme mean?
Okay. So the 2026 theme for World Wildlife Day is one that is not. Well, when we get into the nitty-gritty, we'll talk a little bit more about it. But this theme this year is actually about medicinal and aromatic plants. When people think of wildlife, they don't really think of plants, but the theme is medicinal and aromatic plants conserving health, heritage, and livelihoods. It highlights how wild plants support healthcare, preserve cultural traditions, and provide income opportunities, especially in biodiversity-rich countries like Dominica. So it's not really focused on animals per se this time, but it's still wildlife regardless. So yeah, that's the theme for this year. I think the mic. I wasn't hearing your mic. Oh my
You made mention of medicinal and aromatic plants. What are these though for the benefit of the listeners?
Well, medicinal plants. Well, in Dominica, I feel we have a culture well surrounded by the use of medicinal plants. So, medicinal and aromatic plants are plants that provide some type of health benefit. You could use them when you feel sick. You can use them in different ways. So, medicinal plants, most time you'll probably put them in a tea or a bath or an extract, or you mash them up, you rub them on your body in certain areas. But aromatic plants, they are plants that give off a smell. They give off a smell. They have sometimes you can get oils and stuff from them, essential oils and all that stuff. So yeah, so that's what we talk about when we talk about medicinal and aromatic plants.
Okay. But then for in our context though, is that something that is we say we're really thriving in terms of the medicinal and aromatic plants compared to other countries? Because when you think of World Wildlife Day, most persons would say, okay, wildlife, we're talking about the manicous and the iguanas and all these different things compared to plants.
Yeah, so well, the thing is, the World Wildlife Day was started in 2013, by CITES, which is the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species. And when their organization actually focuses on wildlife and wildlife flora and fauna. So, like it also, even if we're thinking about the manikou and other wildlife species like the mountain chicken, the Cicero parrot, the Jaco parrot, plants also come under the category of forms of wildlife. And in Dominica, I think it plays an important role too in our cultural heritage and all those kind of things. Because a lot of times, first time you get sick, anything happens, your grandmother would be there to make a tea or something, Yeah, so I really think it plays a role in our cultural heritage in Dominica.
All right, fair enough. But then, okay, as we say, especially in our context, we talk about wildlife. And the linking it back to World Wildlife Day. Mm-hmm. What is the importance really of World Wildlife Day as it relates to a Dominican context? And I guess if you want, you can extend it to a world context in that sense.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, as you know, Dominica is a biodiversity-rich nation. We brand ourselves and we go to the world and talk about how we are the nature island of the Caribbean. And with nature comes our wildlife, our flora and fauna. So we have our wildlife species, our forests and stuff, and other natural resources that we have in Dominica. So I think that it's very important to support and celebrate World Wildlife Day because we have a lot of indigenous flora, fauna, and other species that we should protect. And I think Casey can probably add in on that because, as he's part of protection, a big part of their role is to conserve the wildlife. So let's see if he has anything to add to it.
Casey, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, yes. World Wildlife Day is to raise awareness, like Josh was saying, and it reminds us of the wildlife underpins, remind us that wildlife underpins the ecosystems. So we need to just take care and preserve the wildlife.
Yeah, that's that. I don't know who wants to tackle this one, but that's very important in terms of the ecosystems. And then in our case, as we talk about the nature island of Dominica, we obviously need the greenery and the different types of bush that we use for teas and so on. But then you made mention of our grandmothers giving us tea when we were sick and all of that. But what are some of the other benefits of the bush medicine that we have in Dominica as we're talking about the World Wildlife Day 2026?
Well, the benefits I'd say is, your they talk about your mental health and how health is wealth and all that stuff. So sometimes you could be stressed out and you have some lemongrass in the area. The smell just keeps you, it keeping you more engaged, more in a better state of mind. You have things like the soursop. They say that helps with no easy go over leaf. Sorry, that helps with your stomach pains. You have ginger, turmeric, which can also provide antioxidants and other benefits.
So, and if I may add, the soursop leaf. Well, the soursop leaf, it helps ease sleeping. So if you have problems sleeping, you can use the soursop leaf. Also, the citronella grass is a mosquito repellent, and it also helps with the if you just get the citronella grass and you keep it in, it helps with the aroma, runs away the biting midgets also.
Well, thank you very much for that, and I hope my good friend Chad George is listening to some of the plants that he can use in various time when he has different sickness company asking everybody questions. So Chad, I hope you're listening some of the information, and then again, Josh. So you spoke about the lemongrass and so on and these things. In terms of invasive species, though, of some of these plants, are there any invasives that we can talk about that are really threatening our bush medicines and so on?
Well, in terms of invasive, I don't think we have any invasive bush medicine type plants, but we do have invasive flora on the island, such as the Mimosa pigre, which grows mostly on riverbanks and stuff, but they spread like at a rapid pace. They spread really fast in an area, and as you know, a lot of bush medicine, they need their little cover. They don't really grow out in the open and stuff like that can, mismanagement of your land and property and stuff like that can cause the stuff like invasive species like the mimosa to grow and overgrow and curve the growth of your plants that you would want to actually grow. So yeah, in terms of invasives, that's what we really have going on. I don't know if Casey can mention some other invasive flora that we have, but yeah.
Casey, you have anything to add to that?
Apart from the Mimosa pigre, we also have the African tulip. The African tulip is also an invasive species, but it has been so common at present. Persons even use the African tulip for like beautification in their yard because of the nice red flowers it produces, but it's also an invasive species. So in terms of the invasive species that really attack the herbal medicine, that, as Josh said, there are not so many invasive species.
Okay, and then so then in terms of the invasive species that affect the wild animals, though, because I mean, yes, the females surrounding around plants, but in our context, as we bring it back locally, what are some of the invasives that affect some of our wildlife? Because persons, I'm sure, will be listening to say, well, okay, we're hearing that, okay, the wildlife population is increasing and some of that, and then they're hoping for, expanded hunting seasons and so on. Yes, so the speaking about the invasives that affect our animals on the other side, I want to speak a little bit about that as it relates to that.
Well, that's a very, very good question, actually. But so with the invasives, Dominica, we have our rich biodiversity, as you know. We have stuff like the lesser Antillean iguana, which we have the last stronghold on the island chain. a lot of the green iguana has taken over most of the islands. And with in Dominica, we have been able to protect our iguana species so far. But we have that green iguana that has come into Dominica since around after Maria. The difference you can tell is the stripe on the tail, and there's a big scale on the side of the face. The issue with that is they can actually breed with our own Lesser Antillean iguana, and you can get hybrids and lose the purity of our species. So with it's not widespread in Dominica, and that's just one of the invasives that can affect our wildlife. We also had the Cuban tree frog. It came in, I think, after Maria, around that time too. So we have a few frog species in Dominica. We have 2 tree frogs, and we have the mountain chicken. The Cuban tree frog, it's mainly on the west coast. It's spread on the west coast, really. I don't think it has taken over the entire island yet. Those do affect our frog species, and if anybody, like, ecologically, they inhabit the same area that our tree frogs inhabit. They're bigger than our tree frogs. They're more competitive than our tree frogs. So that's just some invasives that affect our wildlife here in Dominica.
As you speak on Cuban tree frogs, a lot of persons, outside of the West Coast, there have been certain persons complaining of the sighting, and not only sighting, the noise that these frogs make. From the Forestry Department, what are some of the mitigation measures in place to eradicate some of these invasives that we have?
Oh, for the Cuban tree frog, a lot of things. Stagnant water, that is the main issue. Because unlike our frogs, our tree frogs give live birth through the eggs. So they go from egg to froglet and then big frog. The Cuban tree frog has the tadpole. Well, our mountain chicken does the tadpole phase, but it's not water. It doesn't breed in water. It breeds in cavities and crevices on the land, and it makes foam to keep the tadpoles alive. But the Cuban tree frog has a tadpole phase in water. So stagnant water is a big issue. Overgrowth of like grass in especially probably like drains and stuff in those areas, and that's also an issue. Water that you have gathering. The Cuban tree frog, a lot of people think that it is because it's toxic. They believe it will kill you, but it will not kill you as long as you have to make sure that it does not get into your nose, eyes, or if you have any open cuts or your mouth. It will irritate your skin, but it wouldn't kill you. So it's okay to handle it yourself. A lot of people have been calling forestry with regards to that, but we are a small division. We don't have staff to be able to send to everybody's house. A lot of times we give people just some information and they deal with it on their own, and because they realize that it's not as big as an issue as they thought it was to deal with. So
when you say deal with them, you mean they giving?
Euthanize them, like they're invasive. So I think the best way to deal with them is to get rid of them.
But what are some of you made mention of the iguana and some of the spots and so on. What are, for the person maybe who doesn't know or may see a frog, what are some of the things to look for in the Cuban tree frog?
Well, the Cuban tree frog is definitely bigger than our tree frog. Our tree frog is about 2 inches in size. The Cuban tree frog can go 4 to 6 inches in size. You would definitely tell the difference. There's the what they calling that, the thing, like the caps on the fingers, like the sticky caps they have that on our frogs. Our frogs don't have that. They're way bigger. They come in different colors. Our frog is only in dark brown, and all our frogs are dark brown. The Cuban tree frog can be a pale beige color. It can be green. It can be brown. It can be a lot of different colors. You would definitely notice the difference. There was a case a few weeks ago with a guy in Canefield. He was saying that he had a mountain chicken at his house in Canefield, which was very, odd. So we told him, okay, we would come to see it. And he was even feeding the frog because he thought he was doing something good. And he had a Cuban tree frog. So we had to let him know that that's not the mountain chicken, it's a Cuban tree frog. So it's a bigger frog than our tree frog for sure. But it's definitely not as big as the mountain chicken. So there's a difference.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Josh. And then, well, earlier we spoke about, you know, the cultural heritage and all of that as it relates to World Wildlife Day 2026 and talking about the plants. We know that in Dominica we're heavily dependent on, you know, using our herbs, natural herbs, for various reasons. What happens if we over harvest these medicinal plants?
Okay, well, in terms of over harvesting, a lot of times, what I've realized in Dominica, we are pretty sustainable people. We don't really push it to the point where it breaks, you know. But in terms of over harvesting, you don't want to over harvest because you obviously will not have the plant for your future and for yourself when you need it. So some things that we can advise people to do is if you're using your bush or your bush medicine, try to break off some parts that you need and use the parts that you need. Don't take the whole plant or don't destroy the plant more than you would necessarily need to use the plant, you know. So also we don't really have what can I say, culture of planting these things like for mass production. Really, we don't really have that culture. So it's more like backyard farming. You would have your bush medicine in your backyard area and you would use that and you would make use of it and when you need it, you know. So I feel like probably we could go into that as a form of business. Somebody could probably do mass production of a lot of the bush that we have producing to make different teas and stuff. But yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you that question because, as you said, you're speaking about what can be done with the medicine, and not only with teas. We look at alcohol, what we call it, pain sprays, and those different things that can be done. I mean, I know you're not the decision maker, but you just made mention of maybe using it as a possible tool for national development.
Yeah, for sure. Like, well, as you said, alcohol. We have the BB rum, and that is from the Boabade plant, which is from the back of the tree. We have different soaps, different types of stuff like that. So that can open an entire world of agro-processing and stuff. I know it's forestry, but the forest and agriculture go hand in hand. So it can really be used for economic development. For example, I have some friends overseas. Every time somebody coming up, they asking me to buy natural soap to send for them, you know. So I feel like these kind of things, the soap, the teas, those kind of things, we can use that to actually bring in income for yourself and for your family and make a business for yourself.
Okay, and then in terms, well, as KC maybe will chime in here in terms of the protection and all of that, and we understand the importance of our forests. But a lot of persons would maybe use backyard farming in growing the medicinal plants and the aromatic plants and all of that. But how important is our forest as it relates to the nature island? As we tie that back to our tagline, the nature island of Dominica, how important or what role does our forest play in the topic discussion today?
Well, our forest plays a very important role because that is the habitat for the wildlife. You know, that's where the wildlife live. Our forest also, even apart from the wildlife, even water, the water we drink, we humans rely on comes from the forest. There's no forest, no water, no water, no life. So all in all, the forest plays a very vital role for humans and for the wildlife.
All right, thank you very much, Casey, for that. And then, well, Josh, in as it relates to environmental education, I'm sure a lot of research goes into to some of those things, and even the World Wildlife Day 2026, I'm sure some of the countries will be doing a lot of research. Why is it important, you know, to have proper research done with the medicinal plants and the aromatic plants?
Okay, well, I think it's important because we need to know what we have, you know. I remember there was a quote saying that destroying forests and biodiversity is like 10 pages from a book that you haven't even finished reading because we don't even know what we have out there. So I think it's important to do research on what exactly we have so we know what we have and especially for us not to end up in situations where people may know outside parties may know about things that we have in abundance and come to us and exploit our resources without us even knowing, you know. So I think it's a good point to do research on in terms of species distribution, how sustainable it is for harvesting, if the species are threatened or not, you know. Like sometimes you think that you have a lot of something and you don't really do proper accounting for it, and then before you know it, you don't see it again. For example, our forest officer, Mr. Eugene, was telling me about a type of tree that they used to use to make furniture. I know if you go to older houses, you'll take that smell, and that was the tree that they were using. And he said that tree is basically extinct in the wild in Dominica. So people didn't really know, and they over-harvested, they overused it, and then right now it's just a few of them in Dominica.
That's sounding like the Lauyedi was.
Yeah, the Lauyedi was, exactly that. So it's a plant that they use a lot for furniture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from the forestry department division, well, earlier we spoke about, you know, development and so on. Let's say, example, I'm coming from overseas and want to know a lot more about, you know, some of the plants and the uses that they have locally. Is there any official documentation about a lot of this knowledge that we have as it relates to these plants?
No, not to my knowledge. I think there is online. But in terms of if you come to forestry division and they like a government document to say, okay, we have this and that, I don't think that they have that available. A lot of our knowledge is traditional knowledge, as I said, like passed on from the older generations to the younger generation. Your grandmother will tell you what to use for this. A matter of fact, I had the carnival flu last week and my mother was telling me to get some tabac zorbi, you know, and they have all their rules, you know, pick it before 6 o'clock, you make the tea cool down before you drink it, you know. So I don't think there's a extensive guide to tell you about these things. A lot of it is just knowledge that's passed on from mother to son, from grandmother to children, you know. It's that kind of stuff.
Well, I'm sure you're not the only one that had that carnival flu. and I think maybe the way you heard about it, if you didn't have the flu, you may be one of the lucky ones. So yeah. I'm sure that a lot of these plants that you're talking about were used or utilized to sort of cure that flu, because I mean, as we said, the herbal medicine and the traditional knowledge that we have is very important as it relates to that, and maybe that is something that we need to look at. From a standpoint of documenting those things, so that, you know, even persons coming from outside, as we maybe explore opportunities to sell and all of that, to have it documented that this is done for this particular reason, and you know what to look for in a particular plant and all of those different things. But 2026 though, what is the forestry division doing to celebrate this year's theme on Tuesday?
So this year's celebration, we don't plan anything huge. It's a small celebration. We just want to highlight the day. We don't have any activities planned for World Wildlife Day. We do have a few activities coming up for the other environmental days coming soon, but for World Wildlife Day, it will just be a small celebration. We'll do a press release and probably just some Facebook posts and some small community engagement. Nothing huge today for World Wildlife Day coming up soon.
You made mention of community engagement, but I want to take it further to understanding the benefits of the schools, or what role do they play in that? Because I mean, we're speaking about the tradition and all of that. What role do you think the schools play, or how does the forestry division plan to utilize the schools? And we can extend that not only to plants but to our general wildlife as we discuss it.
Okay, well, that's a good question too, because the knowledge is passed down from people at home, but you know, we also go out to the schools to tell them about different stuff and activities. For example, with Orion Academy, we've been working with them to develop their environmental program better. They have an environmental club. We've been working with them for a little while, and they want to also incorporate like a small herbal garden, you know, to get the kids involved in planting and all those things. During our summer program, we had a plant ID field trip. So we gave people some guidelines as to identify certain plants, and they had to find the plants around the gardens and all that stuff. I think engaging with the elders, that's something we always do. when we go to communities, for example, yesterday I was on the field in Cooley, and a lot of times you get a lot of knowledge from meeting people on the field, talking to them, seeing what they have to say about the community and what the plans in the area, different things in the area. So, some small science project, on different things that kids can do and community engagement. So forestry is a type of job where you will always be involved in the community. Like you do your work in the community. A lot of our work is field work. We have officers that stay in the office, but it's a lot of field work and a lot of community engagement. So yeah.
So then, with that extensive field work that the officers are doing, we know some of the difficulties that you guys have in exploring and doing all of these things on the field. But in terms of our wildlife, in the explorations that you guys have, are we satisfied with the build back of our wildlife, even as we talk about the different storms and all the different invasive species that affect our local wildlife?
Oh, for sure. As you know, agoutis and manicous giving people problem right now with their produce. And where we're thinking of actually making special licenses for farmers to deal with
crop depredation.
Yep, crop depredation. That's a big problem right now. Actually, this week, Tuesday, we saw ciceros in the wild for the first time in a long time. Well, we saw them a few times, but this week we actually had a proper view of a lot of ciceros in the wild.
Where you want to mention where? I don't know.
It's up in Syndicate. It's not private knowledge. But it was at Syndicate when we were doing some field work up there in Tuesday this week. So the cicero, is a lot of people see jackals a lot. Jackals everywhere. But the cicero is a more what can I say, like a solitary bird. So it would probably call once and then that's it. But we saw them in the trees preening themselves and everything. The breeding season coming in, so everybody trying to pair up if they don't have a pair. But I don't know if Casey want to add anything more to that.
It sounded like Casey had something to say. He was laughing when he made mention of the agoutis and the destruction that some of them and manicus doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we have it appears that there is an increase in the wildlife because farmers have been coming to the office making complaints in terms of their crops being depredated by a few of the wildlife, such as the agoutis on the potatoes, the dashing, and even the parrots on the citrus. So it appears that there is an increase in the wildlife after the storms, particularly post-Hurricane Maria, where we had almost the entire forest being destroyed. So yeah, we can say there's an increase in the wildlife.
So is that a good thing or a bad thing as it relates to the increase in the wildlife population? Because we hear the farmers complaining.
It is a good thing from the forestry standpoint, but from the farmers, we are trying now to work with the farmers. We're in the process of doing a crop depredation assessment. We have a few farms to visit. I know particularly of a gentleman, I think, in the Cassius area. We have to visit this farm because he's complaining about agoutis and the parrots, or jackal particularly. So it's a good thing from forestry standpoint because there's an increase in the wildlife, but farmers are being affected, and so it's a give and take, but yeah.
So then what advice do we have to the farmers do? Because we know from a citrus point of view, the parrots will obviously forage in that. We have the manicus and the agoutis and all of the different wildlife causing to the farmers. They look at it as destruction. But what advice do we have to the farmers do as it relates to understanding the importance of these animals, using the foods that they're eating, and what should they do in that situation?
Okay, well, the thing is we like to make scientific-based decisions. So, for example, we actually have a few projects coming in this year that will focus on the parrots. So we receive some funding and stuff. We'll do some projects which hopefully we can do some population counts and those kind of things to know exactly what's out there before we just go into doing whatever we want. As I was saying, in case you can probably speak more on that, some special licenses may be made or provided for farmers to do farming, to do eradication on their land of the wildlife that may be affecting them. Also, wildlife farming is a thing that we don't really do, but we actually have permits at the forestry division where you can come. It's very cheap, $25, and you can actually farm the agoutis, and you can sell agouti. You can make it into an industry. You can create an industry from that. You can actually profit from the agoutis that we have here. And I don't know, Casey will add a little more on that.
Yeah. So what we can encourage the farmers for farmers to do is they can come to the office. We give out the information, whichever species that is affecting the farm. We then come and do a site visit to analyze, and we're encouraging the farmers to do rearing of wildlife, because yes, you can rear the wildlife, but it has restrictions, guidelines, particular guidelines. So with rearing of the animals, particularly the agouti, can have an agouti farm, and then forestry in turn would visit the farms regularly to ensure that the guidelines have been followed and the animals are being kept up to standard. So you can do, we can do the wildlife farming.
So then, Casey, my question to you though, in the event that, for example, a farmer is not following some of these guidelines, is there a penalty or are there penalties involved in that?
According to the law, I think there are penalties involved in that, yes. And then the person would have to either meet the standard or they would have to cease from wildlife farming, because the objective is not to have the animals in danger or to be raising them in a critical condition. Yeah, the objective is to raise the animals, and maybe the farmer himself could get some incentive from it by having field visits, can use it as a tour according to the location of his farm. Because these are some of the things that has been happening elsewhere, and I think we have to be innovative. We have to think sometimes outside the box, and these are some of the things that can be done.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much for that. Biodiversity is a hot topic as it relates to the environmental procedures, environmental policies, just as it relates to environment. I'm sure that we can say, or is it safe to say that Dominica is very rich in biodiversity?
Yeah, for sure. You would not be wrong if you said that. Dominica is a very rich biodiversity island. As we say, we pride ourselves as a nature island of the Caribbean. We have extensive forest cover. I think it's between 65 to 70% forest cover. We have a lot of mountainous terrain. It's a small island, but we have a lot of mountains on that small island. We have numerous rivers. A matter of fact, we saw a waterfall in the middle of nowhere yesterday. I mean, they knew it was there, but it was new for me. In Kulibistri area, where nobody even goes there.
Kulibistri?
Yeah, there's a waterfall up the trail. When you go up to the farmland where the Kulibistri people farm, there's a waterfall all the way up there, and that's the first time I saw a waterfall in my life. And we also have a lot of protected areas. We have our Northern Forest Reserve, the Central Forest Reserve, as well as the national parks. So we have Mont Wapito and Mont Diablote National Parks, and the Cabritz National Park. Yeah. So we have our protected species, our protected areas, and all of this helps our species to thrive, our endemic species and our trees and stuff to thrive.
So then, as you talk about these protected areas, and I guess it's self-explanatory why you call protected areas. Mm-hmm. What are some of the iconic wildlife species that we have on island today?
Okay, well, the star of the show, obviously, the Cicero parrot, the Amazon Amazon imperialis. We have the Jaco parrot, that's on our coat of arms. The mountain chicken, also on our coat of arms. And the Lesser Antillean iguana. Matter of fact, the Lesser Antillean iguana, as I said, we are one of the last islands in the archipelago that has the Lesser Antillean iguana still thriving. And we actually did an exchange with Aruba, I think it was. I don't want to give the wrong information.
That's okay.
But we did an exchange where we sent a few of our species of the Lesser Antillean iguana to another island, and through that, I think we sent like 20 individuals, and it ended up exploding, and the population is over 300 and something right now. So it's important that we keep our wildlife protected and safe, because look how we were used as a safety net population for another island. So we reintroduced the iguana there. It was a big success story. I think you can find it with on Rewild. I believe it was done in Flora and Fauna International. So yeah, I don't know if Casey had something to add. I think I heard him.
Oh, that is pretty much the most iconic wildlife species in Dominica. You know, the Amazon imperialis, the scientific name for the Cicero parrot, can only be found. Is endemic to Dominica. It can only be found in Dominica.
Okay.
And our mountain chicken, which is almost extinct, but we have the program to bring it back. Scientific name, the Leptodactylus phallax.
Yeah.
All right, but I have a question, because we made of the mountain chicken, and I know from our standpoint that some stuff was done with Montserrat, I believe it was.
Yes.
Where are we as it relates to that? Because about 3 decades ago, about 4 decades ago, that was the population of the mountain chicken was, it was heavy. But where are we currently as it relates to the mountain chicken?
Currently, the population is small. It's a small population, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. There was work done in 2022, where they did extensive field studies on the mountain chicken. There was a huge team that came through the Mountain Chicken Partnership. We have a lot of partners on that program, and they did extensive field work as well as DNA and genetic testing. And then we found on different alleles of the mountain chicken genes in Dominica, they're resistant to the fungus that is killing them. So the hope in the future is that we get the resistant individuals together, and then we can get them to breed, and then we can reintroduce them to the wild. Because the population in Montserrat, they don't have the resistance. We want to mimic Montserrat in a way where they have the semi-wild enclosure. So they have an enclosure in the wild, but it's semi-blocked off because it's to protect the frogs, where the frogs breed, and then eventually the hope is to send them back out in the wild. We don't have that in Dominica, but we would like to mimic that and use that as a way to push the species back out of the critically endangered status. And I know some people probably like to hear that, but probably if it works well, you can probably even get back to being on the plates. But for now, it's totally not an option.
But are you confident though that there's a strong possibility that it may go back on the plates, as you just said?
But if it does, not right now. Although they do breed a huge clutch at one time. I think they can breed up to 40 frogs at one time. So if we can get the semi-wild enclosure going, and 40 individuals will turn to 180 very quickly, and then the population can boom back up very quickly. As I said, we're working closely with Montserrat and the other partners. We have ZSL, Durell, we have Northern Zac, and a whole bunch of other zoos in Sweden and Europe. And it's a lot of work being done on that species. So through that work, we have a lot of information, especially the resistant genes that we have in Dominica, which is not found in Montserrat or in the European species. It's only in the Dominican frogs. So if we can focus on that, and we can actually get them breeding, then I know the hope. It looks, as I said, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. We actually we can see some progress, and we can get some progress. As a matter of fact, we may have some good news coming soon in terms of the mountain chicken. But yeah, that's all I'll say now.
But then, Josh, you made mention earlier of that guy who was feeding a Cuban tree frog and thought it was a mountain chicken.
Yes.
Is the Cuban tree frog safe to eat? Because I'm asking that because there are a lot of persons who love their wildlife. And
that's
if
true.
there was a person maybe feeding one of these frogs, there could be a possibility that he maybe was planning to put it on his plate at some point. I'm just thinking wildly.
Yeah, I would not advise the general public to eat the Cuban tree frog. As I said, the skin, they secrete a toxin on the skin. It will not kill you, but it will irritate you. and I definitely would not advise somebody to try to eat it. I don't know if there's documentation that people have eaten it in other places, but I would not advise that.
All right, well, thanks for that. Because, as you said, I'm just being thinking about it wildly and using the situation that we spoke of earlier.
Yeah,
but
sure.
what are some of the threats, though, to our wildlife currently? Not just the mountain chicken, but just in general.
Well, invasive species, we know that for sure. That's the green iguana and the Cuban tree frog right now. They're trying to establish themselves in Norman. Well, I would say the Cuban tree frog is established, but it's not everywhere. And the green iguana I wouldn't say it's established. But they are coming into the island and they will really compete for the same resources and stuff. And a lot of time the invasive species come more aggressive, more adaptable. They'll be able to survive in urban areas amongst people and that kind of stuff. Habitat loss. Poor management of the forest, and even on your land, your personal land, and our national forest, like poor management of that would cause habitat loss and cause your wildlife and other animals to suffer, which is why the forestry division does a lot of work in terms of habitat loss to combat habitat loss. So reforestation and all those kind of things, and especially watershed monitoring and all of that, which we do with the Met Office. Climate change, well, that's something that we cannot really combat on our own, but we see the effects of climate change. Sometimes it throws off the seasons. You would get rain when it's not supposed to rain. You'll get dry spells in the middle of times where it's supposed to have rain. Illegal hunting under the Forestry and Wildlife Act. Illegal hunters can be penalized by fines, and I even think jail time. Casey can give me more information about that. I think that's where he is. And then extreme weather events, for example, the 100 years storms that are coming more frequently. Because of climate change and stuff, those things really affect our biodiversity and our habitats. But in terms of illegal hunting, Casey, you can just add in something there.
Yeah, illegal hunting, you can be once you are found hunting illegally, you will be penalized. There's a fine, and if you can't meet the fine, then there is, I think, a period of imprisonment that is attached to the fine.
I just can't maybe fathom somebody maybe being sent to suffer in prison for illegal hunting. I think that just sounds dumb to me in my estimation. But as we say, just an appeal to persons to respect the seasons that are in place for hunting. Guys, we have just about 5 minutes left, and I want to kind of, before we wrap up, kind of tie in the discussion with the wildlife to this year's theme for World Wildlife Day as it relates to plant conservation and all of that. In terms of that linkage between plant conservation and protecting our wildlife, how do we link these two?
Well, without the plants, we don't have the wildlife. That's simple enough. Without the trees, for example, the Cicero and the Jacko, they nest in cavities in the trees. Without the trees, there's no cavities for them to nest. No Cicero, no Jacko. The iguanas and stuff, they rely on fruits and other trees and all those kind of things to survive and live. And they also nest in rocky cavity areas. If we don't conserve those areas, protect those areas too, then our population of iguanas and stuff will also drop. So it's a balance. Everything works together in balance and in harmony. And so it's no biodiversity, no trees, no forests, then the wildlife will suffer. So it's the plants and the animals, it just works together like that.
All right, well, as we wrap up, Casey, I think I want to start with you. As we celebrate World Wildlife Day on Tuesday, your final words to the general public as it relates to that.
As we celebrate World Wildlife Day, we would like to encourage persons to help preserve the forest, help protect. Let's not destroy the habitats, because the important. We just gave a few pointers as to the importance of the habitat, so like persons to take note of that. And as the theme is medicinal plants, to encourage persons to do the backyard farming, especially herbal medicine, because it helps. For the convention, for the pharmaceuticals, we can go back to the herbs. So encourage persons to do like backyard farming and do particularly herbal farming. Yeah.
Josh, your final words as we wrap up today's program.
Well, I would just like to encourage the general public, as Casey said, to adopt the forest. You are the stewards of the forest. Without the forest, there's no us. The forestry division is there, but we cannot do all the work ourselves. So far, the general public in Dominica, I realize that they don't really give us issues. They work with us well. They contact us a lot for when they need to deal with wildlife issues, and they don't really take the law into their hands, I would say. So I would just like to encourage the general public to continue doing that, continue working with us, continue being in contact with us, and yeah.
But then, just before we end, you made mention of contacting the division. Is there a number, or if for somebody listening, can you give that number that if they want to contact the division?
Yes, so the number is 266-5856. So that's one of forestry numbers. There's a few others, but I think that one is the main number to call if you need to call in anything to forestry. So yeah.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me on this week's program. This brings us to the end of this first day's episode, the 26th of February of Talking Environmental Responsibility. We hope that the celebration of World Wildlife Day on Tuesday will be fruitful. And next week, God willing, we will be speaking more of some of the environmental stuff as it relates to the ministry, the different agreements that we have signed on to and so on, and just environmental business as we continue our drive to disseminate information as it relates to this ministry. So thank you very much to everybody for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Wish everybody to stay safe as we just spoke about World Wildlife Day and the discussion on the theme. Use your medicines as we try to recover those of us who are suffering from the carnival flu. Powis, I think, is this year's tagline. So thank you very much for tuning in. This brings us to the end of this episode, and be safe.